and welcome to Muscatine Viewpoint. I'm your host, Chad Bishop, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to tonight's special episode. Well, it's not special, it's just another episode in our continuing coverage of all things local Muscatine with a special feature of the upcoming elections November 7th, because we've got a very interesting time in our Muscatine history in which there's a lot of activity surrounding the fate and positive fate of our community. And so I've been having candidates on for the most part over the last several weeks, and will continue to do so leading up into the election on November 7th. Today we'll be introducing our guest, Scott Natvig, in just a moment, but I'm trying to make a point here with this Arby's thing, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine. Trust me, no obligation to know what's going on here. But I've decided to start the Arby's grab bag of gripes. So each week I've got some different things I'd like to gripe about here, and I'll pull one out at random. See, pretty random gripe there. So let's see what we got here. Okay, so, the Pearl of Progress. Pearls of Progress. All right, so Alex, let's see what we got here. Pull up that first slide there. Pearl of Progress. Okay, so I got an email, and I saw on the Voice of Muscatine, there's a Pearl of Progress, exciting project, $8.9 million project going on, and one of them is the H&I Community Center. 25% larger than our current one, estimated cost $6 million, currently pledged $5.8 million. This is not a gripe, by the way. I mean, I'm not really a negative type person, so when I say the grab bag of gripes, it's really just because it rhymed with G. But what I want to say about this is it's awesome, but the one thing I was hoping for, and I know it's going to happen someday with this library, is a space for the theater type situations, like the events that they do for the children's programs, just a little space, and selfishly a space to have film screenings that was a little bit more audience friendly than what they currently had. And I'm not sure that it's currently equipped that way, but hopefully it could be. And it mentions that there's a lot of spaces for rooms and organizations to meet in this library. Okay, I guess the only thing I'm wondering is that really going to be used a lot? The current library has a space for that, and I'm not sure that it's overwhelmingly used as we speak, the archive room. So I'm excited to see what this evolves to as a community center. And this is not a gripe anyway. By any means, I'm entirely supportive of the Pearl of Progress report. So this is one of the key things there. So look forward to all things great happening there. Let's see what the next one is on our Pearl of Progress, $8.9 million project. The West Side Trail. High five on this to whoever it is, the community leaders who keep adding trails to our community. The latest one goes all the way from Muscatine to the Deep Lakes Park. I rode on it the other day, and it is sweet. It's got a lot of twists and curves to it. It keeps you on your feet if you're on your bike, and it leads all the way to Deep Lakes Park. Keeps people off of Stewart Road, and I know the Fruitland people are loving that because unfortunately when bike groups ride, they have to use Stewart Road a little bit more than what's considered safe, and Pettibone isn't very safe to bike on either. So this takes care of all of that, but here's the thing. They're adding the trail I've been waiting for, a trail that connects Kent Stein to Discovery Park. That's the missing link, and it's in the works. They've got just a little bit more they need to fund, 1.75 miles. You can make a pretty nice loop around Muscatine now without ever leaving a trail system thanks to this extension. It's going to open up a whole new ball game. Okay, next up, the Community Dog Park. Okay, now, this one is my actual only gripe issue, and I know there's a reason behind its location, but to me, a dog park is a place you take your dog when you're in an apartment complex or you don't have a green space close to your surroundings. So you take your dog out and he does his business and whatnot. To me, the location is the only thing I think that there's some other options that they probably looked into, and I believe what happened was this was the one that was available for free, which met the budget at the time. But in that particular area of South End, by the time you get your dog in the car, he probably did his business en route to the car for one thing. Drive him to the dog park. I think it'll work for a while, but I mean, have it at Weed Park, have it at the Riverside Park. Really, I think it's more about dogs walking their owners. The owners are the ones that can really enjoy an opportunity to get out, enjoy some camaraderie with other dog owners, give their dog some exercise, of course. But having said that, obviously having a dog park in Muscatine is a win-win regardless of wherever it's at. So another great pearl of progress with the dog park coming up. And then lastly, we have the Deep Lakes cabin progress. So wow. If you've ever been to the Deep Lakes beach during the summer, except for the fact there's no shade, that's my only gripe, you guys need to put your sunscreen on out there because there is no shade right at the moment. They'll probably fix that eventually. But wow, people really wanted a beach in Muscatine. They are using that a lot. Family-friendly beach. The water, right now anyway, I'm sure it will stay that way, is very, very clear and refreshing. And adding some cabins is going to be a great way to continue to expand this into a destination for visitors and Muscatine residents alike. So that's not a cheap one. That's not a cheap pearl. $1 million for those cabins, but they have $8 million. Oh, they have $7 million, and they've got a grant coming for $500,000. You can take it back to me and Alex. They've got a grant for $500,000 from the Community Attraction and Tourism Bureau if they can come up with another $536,000. So, I mean, it says your contribution of any size is needed. So, I mean, I don't know how literally they mean that. You know, $20 here and there isn't going to add up fast, but that's in the works. So what a great Arby's grab bag that I pulled for this week. Stay tuned next week to see what comes out of the Arby's grab bag of good things. There, I just changed the name because that turned out to be less than of a gripe.
It's another G.
Yep. Okay, one last thing here. Scott is here, but I want to tell you about the town divided. Show that graphic. I just came up with this today. We're going to have a special November 1st final debate in which you, the studio audience, can come, be on the show, well, come to the studio and maybe ask a question. No candidates are invited because it was made to my attention. I can't have some candidates on and then not others, and it's too late to have everybody on and spread too thin. So now we're going to have community members on as panel guests. But more importantly, you can come to the show or email me your question, and we'll get to the bottom. We'll just talk about this right before you vote, the debate, the issue of some of the current trending topics that are specific, not to the candidates as much as the hot button issue with respect to our mayor, council issues and impeachment, all that stuff. You know what I'm talking about if you've been following local politics. So stay tuned for that. Okay, let's get going here with Scott Natvig. Thanks for being on the show.
You bet.
Current at-large candidate, Scott Natvig. So you are running again for office, and I'm glad to have you here. We're going to talk about why you decided to run, some of the great things going on in Muscatine right now, give you a chance to answer some of the questions that you are aware that the public might have. But first and foremost, we got to remind ourselves who you are and your background in Muscatine, because not everybody formally knows you.
Sure. Well, first of all, I can mention that I was born and raised in Waterloo, Iowa.
Okay.
My dad was a wrestling coach, a highly successful wrestling coach and a school teacher.
Okay.
So I do remember from growing up that my two brothers and I would wrestle on the carpet in the living room until we demolished an end table. And then our mom said, "You guys are going in the basement." Dad bought a wrestling mat, and from then on we wrestled in the basement. I actually wrestled 95 pounds as a junior in high school and 112 as a senior.
Oh, wow.
So that was back in the days when we did a lot of weight loss.
Yep, yeah, so that, yeah, it was important to be a certain weight in wrestling.
That's right. Huh. So then I attended Iowa State University and earned a degree in engineering there. Later earned an MBA at the University of Iowa and worked for just about 5 years with Cargill Incorporated in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Dayton, Ohio, and then Memphis, Tennessee. Our oldest daughter was actually born in Memphis. And then we moved to Muscatine. It's 38 years ago now. So
wow.
Muscatine has been our home.
And so talk about, so you kind of, you've got some grandchildren, your family is...
Yeah, we've got 3 grown daughters and 4 grandchildren. Two girls, 2 boys.
What do you do when you're not engineering or dealing with or enjoying your council responsibilities?
Well, first of all, I retired about a year and a half ago, so I'm fully retired now, except for council and a few civic duties. My wife would tell you I need some hobbies, but I do enjoy working in the garden, and I enjoy fishing. And one of my daughters got me interested in bird watching, almost as a joke, about 10 years ago, and so now I'm kind of
a bird watcher.
A birder.
Oh boy, yeah. I bet you got for Christmas or somebody gave you a bird watching book, and they thought, Yeah, my dad needs something to do.
Actually, it was a subscription to Birders Digest or something like that.
Well, that's a whole other episode. I mean, we can do a whole
there.
bird watching episode for obvious reasons. But in other words, you've got some time to relax and enjoy life.
I do.
Sounds like.
I do.
And really seize the moment.
In quite a while.
Yeah. And after a productive career in our industry, making Muscatine a better place through your job as an engineer.
Right.
Okay. So, since you are a current candidate, current council member, we asked the question a little bit differently. Not why did you decide to run, but in the time machine, why did you originally decide to run? Like, what kind of?
Sure.
Just talked about that.
Well, if we can go back about 12 years ago, a former councilman approached me and said, "Scott, I think you've got the ideal combination of career skills and community involvement to run for city council." And I was real busy at work, and I told this guy, I said, well, you know what, I may be too old to run for council. Now, this was 12 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And then fast forward to 8 years ago, and some other people encouraged me kind of for the same reasons. And so I said, I'll give it a try. And once I got involved, I enjoy it, but I take it seriously. It's a big responsibility.
Yeah, with the interview with Santos, it was insightful to realize all the work that goes into just learning how to be a council member. And if you're not familiar with TIFs and all the different city codes and things, there's a little bit of a learning curve that you guys take on when you accept this important responsibility.
I think so. I think there's a big learning curve because there's so much that goes on that the public isn't aware of, but needs to go on. So it takes some time in the saddle to really get to the point where you can contribute more than when you just start out. And
piggybacking off that notion, what a great luxury then if we have a candidate or a council member who then decides to run again, because you can leverage all of that experience. On your resume now, you've got years of experience literally being a council member, which has got to be a leg up on a newcomer as far as that goes.
Yeah, that's true. I have some insights that anybody starting out, I was the same way 8 years ago. Yep. I was, most of it was new to me. So.
Now, here's kind of the right off the bat question, but why did you decide to run again? Because obviously there's an issue at stake where all of your decisions as a council member haven't been 100% agreeable with the community. That had to have been a soul-searching type decision. Did you have any insight as to?
No, that was on my mind, but I wouldn't say it was a controlling factor in deciding. It was more, I finally arrived at a retirement, and I wasn't sure how that was going to be. That was an adjustment right there. 2 of our 3 daughters live out of state, and so there's some travel involved to see them, to visit them. So I wasn't quite sure how my retirement lifestyle was going to pan out to, as far as continuing or not. So I vacillated for a while, and then again was encouraged by some other people to hang in there and continue serving. So ultimately, I think it was back in June, I decided I'm going to go for it again.
Great. Well, just thinking about retirement in general, the way I understand it is, it's not necessarily healthy to do less in retirement. It seems proactive to do more. Like my mom retired, and I hear her saying she's busier now than she was when she worked, because you're bird watching, but you can involve yourself in the council, really focus on it maybe more than you could. Is that kind of maybe what you learned?
Yeah, one of my friends from church, he happens to be 92 years old, and he said, Scott, after you retire, you're going to wonder how you had time to work. Yeah. And I think he was right.
That's a great way to look at that.
To a very large extent. So.
Okay, well, great.
The other thing is, after 40 years of having a career where there's a lot of day-to-day pressures and responsibilities, it's hard to go from that to not much. So there's that part of serving on council.
It could become a depressing sort of or a noteworthy transition in your life from working to retirement if you don't find purpose. That's just my take on it.
Right. I like to have some purpose in front of me.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's so many different ways a community member can provide purpose to their lives, but serving on a local government is definitely one of the more profound ones that I can think of. So talk to us about the difference between at-large versus like running for a specific ward. This is just kind of a personal question, but did you consciously decide to run at-large as opposed to your ward, or is that just what was available at the time? Or
it was more the latter. That's at the time I was encouraged for the second time to run again. That's the seat that was open. That was a bigger challenge. It was a bigger challenge for me, but as my first time in trying to get into government. But it was a challenge for anybody because it's a much bigger scope than a ward.
Yes.
Just in terms of
everything,
getting your message out to more people, more door-to-door conversations, more personal conversations.
Well, exactly. I'm thinking if I was to run, or the first thing I noticed was you have to buy more yard signs and cover more distance. And well, that right there is a big difference.
It's a bigger budget
to try to cover everything. And then, yeah, the door knocking, I mean, that's probably, you used your wrestling health to cover all that ground because you got the whole town to work with. So when you, I don't know if you door knock per se, but how does that work out if you go to a door and they're not, do you know ahead of time that they want your sign, or are you actually trying to sell some people on it? I'm just curious.
The sign placement is really, at least in my case, is totally separate from the door-to-door door knocking. You know, there are certain people that I feel like I can approach about placing a sign, and there's others that approach me and say, I'd like one of your signs.
Okay.
Had one just last night at the forum. Somebody asked me, can I have your sign?
That's nice.
So it's a little bit of both on the signs. The door knocking, try to get around the whole community. Usually can't get everywhere.
Yeah.
There's only so many hours during the campaign. But 8 years ago, I actually had both my daughters visit from out of town and help me with the door knocking. So
that's cool.
Yeah, they were glad to do it.
And I like the idea that that people are physically going to houses, even though when somebody knocks on my door, I'm going to assume it's somebody selling me something. But it's refreshing to not be using technology to do that, you know, like to stay true to the person-to-person touch.
Yeah, and it's a good way to answer questions. You know, maybe it's a kind of involved question or not easily answered in other ways, and you can actually discuss it with the citizen until they understand it.
Yeah.
For an issue or something.
It's fun. I mean, it's rewarding probably to feel like you're helping people.
And I've always been kind of a people guy. I enjoy talking with people anyway, so it's
there you go.
It's a good thing.
Well, that would be a helpful trait in a candidate or a council member. Well, let's talk about some of the accomplishments. You gave me some information. I kind of know the answer to this, but this let's talk about some of the fun stuff going on with respect to what's happened over your last 8 years here.
Yeah, you know, and it's almost like I have to take some of the larger ones because there's really a lot of stuff that's happened. And of course, the corridor project, coupled with the hotel, those kind of they're kind of complementary projects, but they represent two of the larger investments in Muscatine in a long time.
The Mississippi Drive Corridor project is underway.
Right.
Is the Grandview one for sure happening? I mean, I went to the meeting to talk about it. Is that for sure?
Yeah, that was
in the
good
works?
that we had the public input on that project.
Yep.
Well, it's we're planning on doing it. You know, it still has to be approved, but it looks like the funds are going to be available based on the transfer of jurisdiction funds, which was, as you may remember, $13 million. The Mississippi Drive portion, phases 1 and 2, roughly $9 million. You know, so it looks like we're going to have the funds in place for the Grandview.
That's like a facelift for that whole end of town.
Oh, absolutely, it's going to be it's going to be a good thing for a lot of reasons. It provides it's the street design, pedestrian safety. It's going to be geared towards even some economic development facets because we've had these Dan Burden. I don't know if you remember when he came to town. He was actually here 2 separate times.
Yeah.
And once for Blue Zones and once on the city's bill. And, you know, he helped us. I mean, he wasn't the particular design firm for this project, but some of the things he taught us on the downtown 2nd Street plans and Mississippi corridor were applied to the
walkability and pedestrian friendly. And you bring up a point that I know some people aren't clear about. When they see the Mississippi Drive corridor design of the streets, I've already saw one question on the social media.
Sure.
There's less traffic lanes, and people might be confused as to why the city went out of their way to make it less traffic friendly and more pedestrian friendly. I know exactly what's going on, but you want to take
Yeah, well, if I can recall what Dan told us about, it's a concept nationwide, and he's got a lot of different cities where he's designed this, is we really we don't want the traffic to just speed past the downtown corridor. We want them to slow down at least enough to see what's there and hopefully do some business in town. And then there's this thing called the complete streets concepts, where there's buffer zones between the traffic lanes, and the sidewalks and the merchants, and it's walkability.
Walkability. So, and also the way I see it, it's connecting the downtown with the riverfront, because right now with the railroad tracks and the 4-lane highway, if you will, those are almost two separate things. And if we can merge those as much as you can without getting rid of that street entirely, we've created a whole, a huge new feeling to what it's like to be downtown Muscatine.
Yeah, and citizens may also hear another term of placemaking, and that's kind of a trendy term in street design and city layouts now. And placemaking mean that there may be a place where you've got a green space for walking your dog or taking your children, and then there's a place for dining outside, and it's all connected by walkability and complete streets design. So it's going to be totally different, and I think it's going to be great for downtown.
Yes, and again, walkability, it's a healthy option. There's
there's a health aspect.
It's making people healthier whether they like it or not in some ways. It sounds weird to say it that way, but it's not designed to drive more traffic through that area. It's in San Luis Obispo, they actually got rid of the entire highway that used to go through the downtown, and at first residents were infuriated. Years later, that's the best thing that could ever have happened to them with respect to their health, wellness, and their economy. So, but one last thing in the Grandview corridor, this Carver turnaround roundabout deal, I don't feel like I know. Is that happening, or is that?
Well, that's yet to be decided by council. We'll call it phase 2, is hopefully be completed by fall of 2018, and that will be from the Mulberry, Mississippi Drive corner there, where you can kind of curve around all the way to, past Broadway. That should be done by the late 2018. But the two bookends, the Mulberry, Mississippi Drive intersection, or not the Mulberry, 2nd Street Mulberry intersection, and the let's call it the Carver Corner, Main Street, 8th Street, I guess it'd be Main Street there. Those two bookends are still to be voted on by council. The consultants have come up with some options, and there's like 3 different options down there at Carver Corner. And
the roundabout is one of many. The one by the Y, I look forward to getting in that thing, because you don't have to stop. You're not sitting there waiting for traffic, and you truck right on through it. I think a lot of people enjoy it once they realize.
I think they were apprehensive at first, and I don't blame them. Nancy and I, when we lived in Dayton, Ohio, way back in 1976, they had, or Tip City, actually, Ohio, north of Dayton, they had a lot of roundabouts, even in a smaller town than Muscatine, and we got used to them, and so it was an easy sell for me by these traffic experts. So I'm kind of a proponent of the roundabout, but I understand why people that hadn't been used to them would be apprehensive.
Let's continue on with some of the things that you had accomplished. I wanted to talk about the port one, but a couple of those other ones that you want to kind of note, some progress over the last 8 years that you feel like you want to mention.
Again, downtown is some of the revitalization incentives that we provided as a council, some low-interest loans, some forgivable loans, TIF money with regard to the hotel, and we'll get to that later, but that's another thing that will bring other.
Yeah, so some of the businesses downtown, if you wanted to start a new business, you gave them a loan for X amount of dollars, and they could put in their amount for the business.
Some matching loans, yes.
So you were stimulating the growth of business, getting businesses to start down there.
That's right.
Successfully, it sounds like. 4 businesses or so.
I think something like $350,000 in just one category of loans over the last 3 years.
Wow.
So
and it's working.
That's right, and there's very few vacant storefronts now downtown, and I'm excited about that.
The estimates of how much money the hotel and this downtown revitalization is going to bring into our Muscatine economy are impressive, to say the least. And that affects everybody. You don't have to live downtown or have a business downtown to be affected by the positive traffic and economical boost this is going to bring to you and your family.
Oh yeah, it's a big transformation. Let's see, what else? Of course, the major road upgrades around town. It's probably hard for people to think back, say, Cedar Street before it was totally changed, or Colorado. I know on the Cedar Street project, there was at least 3, maybe 4 different options there, and I pushed hard for the one that we ended up with the trail on the side opposite the Y there. I guess that'd be the north side. And it was the most expensive at the time, and then adding in the roundabout, it added the price tag, but I think people are happy with it now. I see that trail utilized very heavily.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That trail is like right through the middle of town, so yeah, it's
People
nice.
are using it almost as a big
Oh,
loop.
yeah. It was so dangerous to be walking around there.
It's safer for the school kids that are walking in that, or to or from the Y.
And when you are in your car and you see people using a trail, it was those little nudges that kind of get you thinking about going for a walk.
They see their friends and neighbors.
It's just our wellness index is increasing through the efforts like that.
Yeah, of course I'm excited about the new library. And again, Chad, we're not going to be able to get through all these things because there's just so many good things happening.
Let's talk about the port just briefly. Yeah. The port container, it got brought up at the debate or the forum last night. It's kind of a big deal, but it's confusing. I mean, I don't want to explain the whole thing, but you had some things you wanted to mention about it. My take on it is that we can potentially have a port in Muscatine that the next closest one is St. Louis, I believe. We can have a container port in Muscatine that will make Muscatine the hub of transportation, combining with our airport. We can upgrade our airport just a little bit to make it more freight friendly, have a river port, an airport, and then a transportation hub with semi-trucks. We can do that, or we can discourage it through, I guess for lack of better words, trying to have the public side of things be a little bit too controlling of the situation. And the current companies, the private industries, could decide, well, hey, well, never mind then. If it's going to be so regulated that it's not worth it, we'll just pass on the whole idea of a port, which would be a shame because this, as Mike Raywald, I believe, said last night, could be our next big thing. We had the lumber industry with the Steins, and Muscatine used to be called Casey's Landing for all the lumber that we had. Well, the trees are not able to be forested anymore. Then the clams with our pearl button industry. Then file cabinets and Max Stanley were our big thing. This Port Authority is that huge of a deal. This could be our next big, huge Muscatine growth opportunity. But the thing is, it's very close to becoming just a passing notion, as we understand it.
Well,
that's just my take.
Maybe I can clarify things a little bit. We're still early in this, and so we do have some information maybe that the citizens wouldn't yet. There's a couple, there's probably even more than a couple, but the two main ways to approach this are either the Port Authority, where it's run solely by a governmental entity, or the commission form, where it's a partnership between public and private. The Port Authority has some advantages, but in my estimation, the biggest disadvantages are that it's another level of government. They'd have a separate board, and they would have bonding authority, and they could also levy their own a tax levy, in addition to the existing city levy. So, that's always a concern. Mm-hmm. I mean, it can be reasonable, but it can get unreasonable. The commission form, then, if you think of the property lines around this transloading facility, anything inside the property line would be private and private investment, but the city would have an investment responsibility to upgrade the roads and the utilities serving that facility. So the city then would benefit by property taxes from the private operation, and the private owners and operators would benefit from their operation. Now, the other advantage of having that set up, and again, we're early in this, so there may be some facets that I haven't even learned of yet, but they can if it's private, they can scale up the investment, start out a little bit smaller, and then expand the facility as they get business, because they're talking about a 300-mile radius.
Wow.
To be the port. Quad City Industries.
That can be a game changer for Muscatine.
Absolutely.
When we're working with this hotel and the proposed landing area and some of the upgrades to the riverfront, we haven't even talked about that, but there's a huge riverfront development project going on. This could be, that's why I brought it up, because I think that some people don't realize how big of a deal this could be. It's complicated concept. Quite frankly, it's kind of, boring. I don't know, it's like, okay, but this is a big deal. And the third party, the city, the private industry, but the residents of Muscatine will be affected in a lot of positive ways with respect to our economy and our growth. I believe we're aspiring to have 30,000 people by 2030. A lot of times I heard people ask, how come so many people work here but don't live here? How can we change that? And my quick answer, this Port Authority will be a nod towards that. If we have a larger population, it'll foster more things to do. More businesses will come here.
I think anytime you can expand your local economy, you're going to see
city
growth.
And why don't people live here? It's not a matter of having more restaurants. I heard that last night, I think. It's not a matter of more things to do. It organically works itself out if there's a demand for things based on the population. And I think the Port Authority is one of many ways that that's going to happen.
Oh, I think it's got a lot of potential. Now, it's not inexpensive, so we just have to kind of see how things go here. But I think, well, it's got a lot of support right now, and I'm optimistic that we can have it.
Okay, good stuff. Well, like you said, we could go on and on about that. And, after the election, this show is not going to necessarily stop, so we might have you out and we'll talk, or maybe we'll see how things go. But I want to bring up all these great things more and more. Let's get on to some of the other kind of issues that are on the table here. I'm just kind of going in order at the moment, but there is a little bit of a situation going on with the city council mayor kind of impeachment scenario, and one of them that kind of caught my attention was the concept of closed sessions. I understand completely how closed sessions work for the most part and how they are vital to all governments in America have closed sessions.
Sure.
But can you shed any light on what a closed session is in the first place to people that might not know?
Sure, a little bit. They're all regulated under the state of Iowa. There's under Chapter 21. The state actually allows 12 different reasons for going into closed session.
Okay.
But I can simplify it a little bit. The three most common would be personnel evaluations, property transfers, which we have from time to time, and potential litigation.
Right.
Those are the three most common. The other 9 are, I could read them off to you, but they're about boring. They are boring. But so the law is specific about what kind of things qualify for closed sessions.
Well, it's a privacy issue too. There's some of those things you just mentioned. You can't be talking about Joe Smith, if he's got a nuisance abatement order or something. That's not something that the public. I mean, it's a privacy violation. It's out for other reasons.
And performance evaluations. I was used to that in my career when I was evaluating
all businesses
somebody.
Have, yep.
Sure. I mean, if I was giving a performance review or something like that, that was confidential between me and the person I was evaluating. The property transfers, the reason for that is if some of those discussions weren't private and the right people found out about that the city was considering acquiring some land or something, well, then the price may escalate quickly.
That's true.
So, I mean, there are reasons for these closed. They're not just arbitrary. I think that's one of my main points here.
I mean, it does seem, I guess I could see where, you can have closed sessions if you're a corporation, but there's a transparency issue with the public government, but there's, like you said, very specific reasons why it doesn't work to let the public in on every little nuance of every decision made for reasons that protect the public's rights is really what it is. It's protecting the public.
And the other part of the law is that if you're going to take any action, that has to be back in open session.
Yep, exactly. Those are just a way to kind of hash it out before you present it. It eventually all comes to
That's right.
Goes to the. Now, do you feel that that the public should have access in certain exceptions? Because there's kind of an exception right now that the closed sessions are being asked to be made public. Do you have any thoughts on that? Not about what they contain, but should all closed sessions remain closed always?
I would have this comment that our closed sessions were confidential, but they weren't secretive. So, I mean, at some point, I'm okay with them. The state law on standard closed sessions is they are sealed for a year.
Okay. Okay.
But
makes sense.
If the judge were to rule to release them, I'd be okay with that.
Okay, so I know you've got an opportunity to clear up some of the gray area with respect to the city council's decision and thought processes when it comes to the decision to formally choose to remove a current member of office, the mayor in this case. But some members of the public are confused, rightly so, because at certain points you weren't able to talk about that. But you actually, right before the show, were able to show me kind of some of the ways that you were following certain guidelines. What are some of those guidelines that helped you come to the decision to?
Sure. I can cite two provisions in state or Iowa Code Chapter 66. Point 29 is the, and I don't expect anybody to remember that, but that's the provision where removal of any elected official can be done in a local hearing, and that's the provision that we were operating under. The other provision that I think people would be interested in, because I do get a lot of, not so much lately, but earlier, comments, why didn't you just pass this along to district court?
Okay.
Why did you? Because of the due process concerns.
It wasn't an option.
And that's correct, because Chapter 66.3 allows 3 different avenues. It's the state attorney general, the county attorney general, and the other one is 5 registered voters, but that avenue wasn't available to us as a council. So people probably didn't understand that, and then because of these closed session rules, we're kind of, but I can at least explain that part of it, what state provisions apply here, and I hopefully that makes answers some questions for.
It doesn't sound like you had an option. The option you did have an option whether or not to seek to remove the mayor or not, but you didn't. Once that decision was made, you didn't have the option to circumvent the public hearing part.
That's correct.
And you can see where people were a little confused by that, especially the result wasn't like we were on pins and needles waiting to see what the council was going to vote. We already knew the vote. We already knew.
And the vote was not unanimous, but I think maybe there was a little bit of uncertainty that morning. I mean, as far as to district court or not, because it was only that morning that we were apprised of these. So we didn't have a lot of time to decide, but I think it's important that citizens know that, that's kind of what was behind that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm glad you're able to kind of let people know. That shows about educating people with your perspective. Yeah. Now, there's 2 mayor candidates. Now, I was watching the debate last night, or forum. It wasn't really a debate, and I kind of noticed that it's not really even about the Harper versus Broderson at this point. It's kind of more of a theoretical concept. Like, do you believe in a strong mayor, weak mayor? Do you have a clerk, administrator? I mean, it was kind of more about how should our Muscatine government function with respect to the processes is kind of what I saw. And so the council members, including yourself, were able to talk to that a little bit more than even maybe the 2 mayors who have,
Yeah. Well, and again, this is kind of technical, but the state allows 8 different city structures.
Okay.
But in our particular structure, we're a special charter city that was actually started back in 1851. And then in 1857, the state said there will be no more special charter cities, so both a long, long time ago. But the state does allow special charter cities to adopt mayor-council formats within that special charter. And then there's different forms of mayor-councils, but the mayor-councils are the most common format across the state of Iowa by far, just far and away. And in all those different mayor-council options, the mayor either has a tie-breaking, or either has a vote on council or a veto, but in no case does he or she have both. So if he or she has a vote, they can't veto, and if they have veto, they can't vote. It's just the way, if you look through the other, and of those 8 options that are allowed by the state, only 5 of them are currently used across the state.
The mayor, okay, so I'm confused slightly by what you just said. Does the mayor, because this is one of the questions I pondered in my mind.
It's complicated.
Can the mayor, okay, so you have the 7 council members. What if the mayor, so then you're wanting to pass a resolution, and aye or nay, can the mayor, obviously she or he can't, but can they vote on that? You just said something contradictory.
Well, in Muscatine, she cannot, because just of the type of mayor-council format that we adopted within the...
And she can't veto either.
She can veto.
That's
yes.
so the mayor, the mayor can veto things.
Yes, but she can't vote. In some of the other cities around, some other cities under the mayor-council form, the mayor can vote, but then they can't veto.
Has the current or past mayor under your time in Muscatine ever vetoed anything that you can think of?
I think she was ready to veto a motion, and turned out it was not the type of motion that she could veto. I recall that once.
A veto is pretty powerful.
Very few times.
A veto seems like a powerful option.
And then it takes 2/3 vote of council to overturn the veto.
Okay, so if the council is unanimous for the most part, then the mayor can't step in and say no. Just like Donald Trump can't, there's checks and balances that make things that make sense.
Yeah.
Now I just thought in my mind, well, what if the mayor could vote just as if they were a council member? And I kind of thought, well, okay, then maybe that we'd want to reimburse them more because in order for a mayor to vote, they're going to have to be just as educated and have done all the research that we've elected you guys to do.
Sure.
And that's a pretty big burden to ask of a mayor. The current mayor maybe feels inspired to take that on, but overall, that just changes the whole scope of responsibility. And I don't know if it would be helpful. I know for one thing it would make an even number, so there'd be a lot of ties.
And that's one of the other little idiosyncrasies about these the different mayor council things around the state. Some of the councils are even numbers, and that's usually where the mayor has a tie-breaking vote.
Oh.
So where there's an odd number of council members, it's less likely that the mayor would have a vote, but would rather have a veto. And you mentioned the mayors, if they do have a vote, then that's a bigger responsibility. It's interesting that in Cedar Rapids, that's kind of a topic right now because that's a big city and they have a part-time mayor.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually working full-time.
Yep.
But accepting a lower pay, and I think they may be headed to boosting that pay up in Cedar Rapids. So you've got a good point there.
I was thinking if the mayor makes $7,000 or whatever, double it and then have the hours doubled because they're going to have to do all the same research then that the council members are going to do because you guys do a lot of homework before you get to the council meeting to be able to vote without discussion. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot behind the scenes. That's not a horrible idea. I mean,
well, it's an option. But
I mean, I don't think anybody's really hell-bent on it one way or the other, but it'd be interesting that when I was a young kid, I wondered why the mayor couldn't vote. When it's like, why the mayor vote?
Sure.
And makes sense to me. But that might be something to look forward to in the future. Is maybe if nothing else, that we get an even number of. Maybe we start another ward. The Whispering Pines area. That's not annexed that I'm aware of. Let's get that going. Start a whole other ward, then you got an even number. I'll stop.
Yeah, okay.
So who are you endorsing for the current mayor? We have two candidates, Charlie Harper and Mayor Broderson. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can say that I've known Charlie for over 30 years. We bought our girls' first bicycles from Charlie.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's a while back. And Charlie and I were both just last year on the local RAGBRAI planning and advisory committees together. And I was able to work with him there. I don't think our time on the Chamber of Commerce overlapped, but I was on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors for quite a long time, so was Charlie. I also was able to attend Charlie's presentation about the history of bicycles at the Muscatine Arts Center a couple years back. And he did a great job on that. And I'll be endorsing Charlie on this. I think he'd be a great ambassador. I think he understands the role of the mayor, and I think he'd do a good job.
Now, at the forum last night, I noticed that some of the questions were kind of, to me, they implied that the mayor position would be, they were kind of technical questions that that most people wouldn't know the answers to regardless, because you'd have to have been in the council long enough to, so I'm not sure he came across as flattering of a way in some ways, because he's not a politician per se in that sense. Like, I don't think that's what people are excited to vote for Charlie for, is that he's bringing a political stature as much as he's bringing what you just mentioned, a solid, lifelong, committed resident to Muscatine in helping improve it in any way that he can.
Exactly. He's also been a small businessman, successful small business for I think over 50 years now. So I think that's good.
And if you think about the term ambassador to Muscatine, we have ambassadors to Muscatine. We don't formally call them one, but if I could think of 10 people, he would be on the top 10 list. Anytime you think about people that kind of represent what you think of when you think of Muscatine.
That's right.
Just based on
promote the city, the face of the city, and he was actually on the chamber for quite some time.
That's
so
good, yep.
so that it's a good transition. I think.
Yeah, he'll have a lot of great insight to provide to the meetings.
I think so.
And that's your opinion anyway. Your viewpoint.
My take. That's right. My viewpoint.
I don't want to get too
Viewpoint.
slanted. Yeah, right now it's this is Muscatine Viewpoint. Your viewpoints are welcome as well, community members. Well, good. So, is there anything about our code? You know, last night there was some mention that the code has not been amended or has been kind of slowly changed over the years. Is there anything that, if you could, wave your magic wand? Is there anything that you think we should or could change about our current code? Is there any?
Well,
I don't think
so. I don't think so in general. Back in, not that far back, but in 2015, we spent a lot of time revising or updating the entire city code. It was an open session. The public had plenty of opportunities for input, and it took 6 months or longer. And so I don't know how long it had been done since, or how long it had been at that time since it had been updated. But I think the council did a pretty thorough job of updating those codes. So I guess my short answer is I don't see any needs for code up changes at this point.
So what can we look forward to? You know, we don't have a crystal ball yet, but after the elections, there's going to be at least one change because Fourth Ward is 4 new, fresh candidates. Mm-hmm. But what can we look forward to, do you think, in the next 2 years? Like, what are your dreams? You know, what do you foresee or hope for with 2 years? I'm saying 2 years because, what are your thoughts on the next 2 years after post-election?
Are you mean about council makeup, or do you mean about things in general?
I don't want to push you too far on the council makeup side of things.
Yeah, because that would be a real crystal ball on my part, except for I can tell you that I just plan to continue to work hard to study those agendas thoroughly, get citizen input. You know, I get a lot of calls, I get a lot of emails, and if I don't have the answer, I try to find one. So I'll continue to do that. And you know, we've already been over a lot of the things that are on the horizon. They're big and they're exciting, and
you've got the background and experience to help see those to fruition.
Yeah, and that's
What are you most proud of? I think you kind of mentioned but what are something? Yeah, like, this is a rewarding thing to be a council member. I've got to imagine that you're literally making Muscatine a better place just by the notion of what you were elected to do.
Well, if you could wrap all those downtown things into one, I guess the corridor, the hotel, the business incentives that we talked about, the Second Street walkability, if you can kind of consider those one thing, I guess I'd be most proud of that. But we've also, with all the things going, and the roadways are a close second. I mean, just think back when Colorado, people probably can't think back what Colorado was like when it was in such terrible condition. You know, we've upgraded the airport runway, $5 million project. But in spite of all that, we've kept our tax levy flat for the last 6 years. So it's kind of almost a fourth place. I'm giving you more than one favorite, Chad, but there's been a lot going on. There's a city staff member that has been there for a while now, and that person mentioned to me never seeing this kind of growth in such a short period of time, and that meant a lot to me.
In spite of some, I mean, it's like I said, this is the next big era. I mean, there's been little ups and downs of Muscatine's. Our population doesn't grow. That's a whole other topic for a show, but we're in there's no denying that we're in a real exciting time to be a council member, to be a resident. And if we can exchange this motivation, these positive attitudes as residents, that'll be catchy to these 60% of people who are driving from Davenport and not working here. I think our attitude adjustment can convince people to move here.
Yeah, it all fits together. I mean, there's other factors like housing and schools, and that was discussed in depth last night. But
now the school thing, I don't think that was clear. I'm mentioning Oz might have been a little confused, but the way I understand the school is our rating is low because of a miscalculation on the part of the entity that rates schools. Like we're low to the point where it's not even fallible. It's not even believable that we would be that low. I mean, our school district is, if anything, it should be one of our crowning jewels. And so I think that's what we were mentioning, is that if you go do a search right now, you're like, should I live in Muscatine or not? One of the things that families consider is the quality of schools.
Oh, yeah.
We have great schools.
We do.
And great school district members. And I mean,
and I don't know if you were attended the report card. The school system every year has the breakfast.
Yep, I was there.
Well, and then you can relate that there's a lot of really good things happening within our school system now. Maybe some of the criteria that we get rated on by some rating systems doesn't put us in our best light. I don't know. I'm not sure about that, but I heard that comment last night, and I'm not familiar with that study, but
Dave Govin might be watching, and he told me the answer, and I'm remiss to say that I forgot the exact situation, but there is actually a technical glitch in the way and we're fixing that, because it's not reflecting the situation.
Because as you recall, then the school system has hired, or will be even more, counselors at all levels. I think at the middle school and high school level, to help guide some of these students and career choices.
So spread the word,
like
community members. We have some of the best schools in Iowa in general. Has great school system. Muscatine is by no means an exception. There's
more AP classes offered and all kinds of good things. I mean, so.
Yep, schools would be one of the things we need to promote more. If to people thinking about living here, is that one of the reasons to move here is our schools. Yeah. What about? So I just thinking out loud there. What else do you want to mention? I want to just kind of talk about China just for a second, but is our connection with China a good thing, a bad thing, or just a thing? There's some members of the public that aren't quite as sure about that. Is there any, from your, as a resident, even more than a council member, how do you see things panning out?
I view it as a good thing. They've invested in our community, maybe a minority investor like in the hotel and other businesses, but investment is always good, and the world is getting smaller, so I see it as a good thing. I really don't see any downside. I know maybe some people are worried that they're going to somehow own a lot more stuff or something. I don't see it that way. I mean, I see them as a relatively smaller investment, but a good investor.
Anything new, it takes a while for people to become comfortable with. And the concept of Muscatine having Muscatine centers in China, there's 2 places in China that are called Muscatine centers. That blows my mind. I mean, that's flattering.
Yeah.
I mean, so much tourism is going to be because of Chinese people coming to Chicago and then to Muscatine. I mean, I'm not afraid to take Chinese revenue, in form of tourism, and to showcase the Mississippi River and all these great things. So
I guess my short answer, not so short answer, is I see it as a good thing.
Yeah. So a lot of talk is about you represent the people, but I feel you've been elected to represent the people, but you can't make everybody happy all the time, but we can't have a citywide election for every single decision. Like, the people aren't literally making the decisions. They've elected, in my opinion, a council member to do that. But you get emails from all across the board, and how do you decide which email to take that extra mile, which inquiry to really, get the answer to? And I'm sure you have to not ignore, but you can't, how do you represent the people? Like, what's your take on what your responsibilities are as an elected council member?
I don't think I've ever ignored one, but I mean, I may have to give them an answer that they're not looking for.
Yeah.
But before unless I know offhand, I usually have to check into something, find out, what's behind their either complaint or suggestion. Check with Greg and work through him with staff and find out the whole situation. And as far as which ones do we proceed with, well, that varies too. I mean, it could be a relatively small thing in the city operations, but it's big to that person, so we want to follow through to make sure. One complaint was about a manhole in heavy rains. They live kind of over by the mall, and it ends up in a kind of pooling in his alleyway. Well, unfortunately, it's one of these things that's going to be difficult to fix overnight because it even relates to the mall parking lot.
Yeah.
It doesn't absorb any water. It all ends up somewhere else. So there's one that I'm still following up on, but it's important to that citizen.
Yep.
So
fireworks is one where you probably weren't really sure which way to go on that, because you probably heard completely different ideas from your residents.
Yeah, that was, and then we didn't have much time to decide.
Yeah, it kind of came out of nowhere.
Like about a week.
Well, I'm glad it worked out. Everybody's got all their fingers and whatnot, because our economy, to be serious, was in a state of bother. I know, working through the college district anyway, that the governor unfortunately had to cut a lot of income to the college system in general. There was a budget shortfall, and I'm not the governor. I don't know exactly what was going on there, but I'm pretty sure they were trying to think of ways to get some revenue back here, so that our teachers don't lose their jobs. And anyway, that's a whole. See, there's so many different things we could talk about.
I've always been a big fan of community colleges and what they teach, because I think the skilled trades are something that are important and maybe have been overlooked.
Yeah. I forget to even mention the community college when we're talking about great things, because we've just got a brand new Loper Hall's been
Yeah, I came to the open house. Yeah.
Wow. You just got community members come out to our library when you get a chance. It's mind-blowing. I mean, it's awesome. It's what we're going to have between the H&I Muster Library and this one. We have plenty of opportunities for people to enjoy that form of communicating and utilization of data. What else? We're running a little bit we're about out of time here, but you got a couple things you want to get to. So what do you want to tell residents, or what is something we might have missed?
Well, as far as current issues, the new hotel has a soft opening set for February of 2018. You mentioned the Pearls of Progress campaign. There's a fundraising effort ongoing right now, and there's a local corporation that has a generous matching gift, so that $500,000 really needs $250,000 to achieve. And I think their target deadline is the end of this calendar year, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we've already you kind of covered those things at the onset.
Pearls of Progress. Yeah.
Yep. And riverfront development is ahead of schedule. They're hoping to have the street available for use from it'd be from Iowa all the way over to Broadway before the end of the construction season, and then work on the sewers and underground utilities on Iowa back over to Mulberry during the winter. Have that closed off during the winter, but able to actually work on the underground stuff so that they get an earlier start on pavement and stuff. So
wow. Okay.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Oh, it's got to be fun to be you're right there in the thick of the action.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. There really is.
And now you're running for re-election. You kind of touched base on this, but why should somebody vote for you? There's two other options this year, and why do you want to? Just talk to your constituents about that.
Basically, I'm experienced in city council and bring a lot of experience, but I'm also a longtime resident. So it's my home, and I'm excited about everything that's going on, and I want to be part of the continued expansion and improvements.
Wow,
so
past
in a nutshell,
president.
that's my...
Yeah. You were in the Police Academy, Citizens Police Academy, president of Rotary Club, past member of Chamber, United Way, Ragbri. I think I do remember you on a bike, actually, now that I think about it. Trinity Muscatine Friends. Yeah, everybody running for office is... just the fact that they're running for a council position says a lot about their character. You got to.
Actually, one of my opponents, I ran into him several months back, and he was kind of asking me about things, and I said I admire anybody that it takes a little courage to run for office.
Yeah.
There's at least in my estimation.
I don't think anybody's totally regretted it, but I think I've been hearing that they're a little overwhelmed at first by the learning curve, but also some of the responsibilities. But it sounds like at the end of the day, it's a rewarding and reinforcing.
Oh yeah, I think Santos touched on that last week. How there's a lot starting out.
Yeah.
Your first time, there's a lot there.
So I got to thank everybody that's had the courage to run for office, because that's what it's about. Give the voters some options, and then we'll see how it all fleshes out. Okay, well, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, as you're asking for my closing remarks, I'm a longtime Muscatine resident. There's a lot of great things happening, and I'd like to be part of that, continue my public service and see even more good things.
Well put. Well, go ahead and throw up that, what did I call that? The City Divided? I just made that up today. I don't know, I'm just kind of, this is just the local access channel. I mean, don't get too serious about my town divided thing. I just made that up, we don't sell advertising or have any real opportunity to make money or this is just the show that I want to let people be a part of. I want you to be a guest on the show. Leave that on just for a second. It's Wednesday, November 1st, right here at MCC Studio. You can come and watch, but I'll try to have a microphone. We might be able to, I want to take questions maybe, but we're going to have 4 non-candidates on, and we're going to just go at this issue that seemed to be on the forefront. And I want to remind you that a town divided or a town united, you make the call through your vote on November 7th. So thank you for tuning in to Muscatine Viewpoint. Next week, we have Larry Murray, who's running for 4th Ward, and I'm not sure the other guest will be. Maybe Chris Bynum expressed interest to be on the show to represent his dad's legacy, if you will, or current situation as a 4th Ward member. And so we'll keep talking about all great things happening in Muscatine. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.